In this last section, we're going to look at how you use setting to drive a story onwards. Now, with younger children, you would show them a sheet of paper divided into 3, and you choose a good setting to start off with, or a bad setting. It depends. But let's say it's going to be a good setting to start off with, to a bad setting, and it can be a wood, or it could be anywhere that you choose, and you just write down 4 or 5 words about that place and where they're going to finish up at the end of the story. Get children used to this. This is Key Stage 1 in this form, and you would do it so that you have all of the things, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, everything you could hear in that place, and everything you could see, and everything that you would smell, hear, touch or taste at the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Key Stage 2 demonstration, and this is what we're aiming towards. If you have like bad to bad, it winds up not making a very good story, because it just winds up being too sad, and if it's like good to good, it's almost that kind of syrupy, and the princess lived happily ever after, which is nothing wrong. But I would say for foundation stage and Key Stage 1, have a little look at something like Goldilocks, where you start off in the house, you go to the woods and the houses, and you come back to the original house. So setting in that way, where you use a model from traditional tales. But what I'll demonstrate here is for Key Stage 2, and this can be modified in different ways. So if it's a good setting, where's it going to be? Well, why don't we say in a city? Well, what kind of a city? It's going to be a huge and say clean city. And what could you see? Well, you would see the buildings were tall, and a bit of personification doesn't do any harm, where you would say that the windows were like eyes, and of course things like the doors would be the mouths, and would there be shadows, and what kind of shadows would you have in? Again, if you use different colours, you'd say like dark, calm. Remember, it's a good place, so we need to think of ways of describing this place with positive adjectives. So a good city, it's huge, it's clean, the buildings are tall, the windows are like eyes, there are dark, calm shadows. So for those children who say, I don't know how to write dark or calm, you say that it's in green. What else would you see? You would see like the pavements. Well, we said it was clean, so why don't we have the fact that in this good city would have pavements with no litter? What else could we have inside of this good clean city? A fine smell in the air, a smell say like polish, a smell of polish in the air, because everybody cleans the metal walls and the huge windows, metal walls, we'll say. But it's going to be busy in this city. So noises, what kind of noises? Harsh, let's say harsh scraping noises. Harsh noises. Alright. Harsh noises inside of that place. What else could we have? Let's see. For all it's a good, and it's huge and clean, these harsh noises. What would those harsh noises do? Well, you could say that they echo. What do people do? What do people do in this good clean city to make sure that they can't hear? They've got, like, say, earplugs. Why not? Earplugs to make sure that the noise doesn't get to them. Maybe that's the only negative thing inside of this city. Shops. What kind of shops are we going to have? Well, let's make it so that, say, like cake shops. And sweet smell. Remember, use all of the senses. Sweet smell in the air, in amongst all that. Well, that's a really good description of the place. We know what it's like. It's huge, it's clean. Where's it going to finish up? Well, it can't be good city to bad city. That really doesn't stretch the children or get them to try and describe anything with any kind of conviction. So where could it be if it's a good city, which is like a real urban setting? Let's have rural. Where would it be? Bad. Countryside. Okay. Countryside. Countryside. Okay, bad countryside. And what would we have in a bad countryside? Well, here you would have shadows, and the shadows perhaps would be like quite strong. And in the countryside, it would be like open spaces. Open spaces. And the shadows would be of perhaps like vegetation, of trees and plants. So, say like rounded shadows. As with everything, it's quite often a good idea where you can use like direct opposites. If it's like straight shadows here, round shadows there. It's a bit lazy, but it's easy. So, open spaces, rounded shadows, no buildings whatsoever. Or would there be some buildings? So they're going to be like crumbling buildings. Yep, crumbling buildings. And it's a bad countryside. So what would be bad about a countryside? Well, perhaps it would be that nothing grows. Say the trees are all rotted. Trees are rotted. And well, like those like smells, like countryside smells. Yeah, countryside smells of ruin. And dead animals. If you're going to go for a story, you might as well make it dramatic. So, say like dead animals. Dead animals. Let's see. What could we have now? The trees are rotted. The countryside smells of ruin. Dead animals. What else in a bad countryside would you have? Well, no food, I suppose, would be one thing. No food. I suppose that's almost like the cake shops goes to no food. We talked about smells. What about a taste in the air? A taste of death. A taste of death. You don't have to have exactly the same numbers. All right. Let's choose a character to put into the middle. This is the beginning of the story, this is the middle of the story, how somebody has gone from this place to that place and what has happened to them. So who could it be? Well, we've already had a man and a woman in the other stories that I've done, so why don't we have a child? A boy or a girl? Well, let's have a boy. What kind of a boy? He lives in this city. Does he like the city? Well, let's say no. So the boy, and in the same way as you would describe them, on this, like this, where you would have the drawing and the external and the internal, you can turn it around, and on the other side you can do about the setting, so that the children have standing in front of them their notes. They know what the person looks like, they turn it over, they look at what happens, they turn it back over, describe another bit and turn it over. It's a set of notes that gets used. Trust me, I'm a story writer. So there is a boy, doesn't like the city, wants to get away perhaps, thinks that everything in the countryside, get away. Who does he live with? His mother, father, sister, brother? Could he like a big family? Ordinarily I would wait for children to give me an answer. Unfortunately, in my living room, I don't have a class. So he lives with a family, lives in a big family. Perhaps it's such a big family that Nobody notices him. So nobody notices. And all he's ever done is read about how good the countryside is. Countryside. Thinks everything will be milk and honey. Milk and honey in that place. How does he escape? Is it by the dead of night? By the light of the moon, light of the sun, middle of the day, picnic? So escapes. I quite like that. Escapes. Escapes when no one notices. Okay. Setting, plot, character, second setting. So you would put it all together and you've got, there was a boy. Everybody else in that place loved it, but it was a huge, clean city. The buildings were tall and the windows were like eyes, and all around him there were dark, calm shadows, but he wanted to see the open spaces of the countryside. He wanted to get away. He had a family, a huge family, so many brothers and sisters that he thought that his mother and father would never notice if he was to slip away. He'd read about the countryside. He'd seen beautiful photographs, but the photographs were old. The photographs were from 50 years before this time, before everyone moved into these cities with their metal walls and the terrible smell of polish. The only thing that spoiled this beautiful city were the harsh noises from the cars that moved, hovered above the ground, scraped and crashed every now and again, but to hide their ears from that terrible noise, everyone would wear earplugs to stop the echoing noises, bringing a tear to their eye. But this boy, who had read about the countryside, thought that it would be nothing else but milk and honey. I'm going to escape. I'm going to escape to that place. I'm going to go to the countryside. It can't be as bad as everyone says. And when no one was noticing, by the edge of a cake shop that would have set your tongue in motion and water inside of your mouth with just the sweet smell, he slipped away from his family. His brothers didn't notice. His sisters didn't notice. His mother and father had so many children that they didn't notice at all. Going out of the city, the buildings got smaller. There was no smell of polish. There were no more gleaming walls. And now, at the edge of the city, he smiled and he saw that there were open spaces. No hard shadows, just round shadows from crumbling buildings. Nothing was growing, but he was determined. There was no way that he would stay at the outskirts of the city where he could still hear the harsh noises. He walked on, and now he couldn't tell whether it was day or night. The lights inside of that electrified city switched on and off, not fading as day goes into the night. They would switch quicker than a wink or a blink of an eye. And he kept walking, thinking that the sun would rise, but the air was polluted. Nothing was growing. Trees, he had never really seen a real tree, but the trees were rotted. No branches, no leaves, just a skeleton of crumbling wood. Everything in that countryside smelt of ruin. And then he saw bones, not human bones, but animal bones, as a heavy wind started to blow. But he was determined, and on he went. Without food, without even the sniff of a cake, he started to feel hungry. And he turned. But the wind had blown all of the rot and the ruin and the dust away, and he couldn't trace his path. He found his countryside, but as he lay down, for one last time, there was a taste of the countryside inside of his mouth. A taste of death. And he wished for bright gleaming walls and hard shadows, but all he could hear was the wind blowing. This section is all about using the bags that we are providing with who, where, what, why and when. Now, we're not expecting you to take the bags and suddenly start making stories. It does take some time, it does take some effort, and it does take quite a bit of practice. So what you would have is, you would have a carrier bag. The whole idea of the carrier bag, apart from it being cheap, is that it randomizes. All of the things that we are doing are to try and randomise the choices to make it less of a strain to try and think of something beforehand. So if you have a carry bag like this and you say to the children, we're going to take something out, and this is for the very young ones in the foundation stage, you take out a single object and you ask the questions of who and where and what and why and when. So for instance, I'll put my hand in and I pull out a pair of glasses. A pair of glasses, well, you can with the young ones say, who's got these glasses? Is it a man or a woman or a boy or a girl? Is it an old man, an old woman? Is it a young boy? Is it a tall girl? And you start to ask questions and you can start to form a character. What are they doing with the glasses? Where are they? Why are they in that place? And from that, with the questioning, you're going to find yourself with part of a plot of a story. And that's all you do. You stop. You do a little bit and stop, and then the next day you'll pull something else out of the bag. Well, it's a money box and it's also a sheep, so it could be that. Where is it? Well, it's a farm. Is it somebody who's got lots of money? No, because they're having to save up for something. What are they saving up for? Okay, and you would take out another object. Now this is a set of keys. Now it's a set of keys with a bright coloured key fob on with lots of colours. Well, that could be jewels. You need to show the children that you can use lots of ideas. There's an old piece of string on it. There are 2 keys. Maybe it's 2 doors. What kind of doors are they? Old, wooden, hard? Are they oak doors? Are they golden doors? Are they a door to a castle? And you get the children to start to think about the 3 objects. You do them one day at a time. One object, who, where, what, why, when. And at first I would say don't try and make a story from them. Just enjoy the questioning. Just enjoy getting used to the idea of asking the questions and getting the children and negotiating with them as to how you could form a story. So let's look at them as a for instance. There are other examples on the DVD. So it's an old man with glasses. An old man with glasses who's a farmer. An old man with glasses who's a farmer who's lost his way when he was trying to find some sheep. Now he didn't have very much money, and what did he come across but a pair of keys that were lying on the ground. As he was reaching and trying to get his glasses, he found the keys, but he noticed that the keys had jewels at the side of them, and the keys were for the castle. And down on all his hands and knees was a woman. It was the old queen who'd lost the keys, and the 2 of them bumped their heads together, the old farmer and the old queen, and they laughed because she knew where the sheep were and he knew where the keys were, and the 2 of them had helped each other, and from that time he didn't have to save his money. He had lots of sheep, and to make sure he didn't lose his glasses, just like me, he put them on a string so he wouldn't lose them, and he would always see whatever he wanted to see, but the thing that he liked to see the best was the queen with the keys in her hand. And you've got to admit that that's a better story than once upon a time there was a set of keys, some glasses and a piggy bank. And you do it a stage at a time. What we've done is we've put together these rucksacks, and on each of the rucksack pockets we put a tag, and it's got why on one and where on another, and who and when and what. And with the young children, what you would do is, you don't worry too much about what's on the key fobs, but you would just pick something out. Well, let's have a little look. Take something out of the what bag. And you take something out, and there is a piece of fake fur. What could this be? What does it feel like? How could you describe it? What could it be? It's a man who's got a carpet inside of his house, and he likes to lie down in front of the fire and keep himself nice and warm. But when he goes upstairs, he's really cold, and everyone would say to him, "Oh, you are daft. You're nice and warm downstairs." Well, if that carpet is nice and furry and nice and warm, well, when it's warm, take it upstairs with you and put it on top of your bed. And from that time, that man took the piece of fur, and when he was going to go to bed, he wouldn't leave that fur carpet in front of the fire all snug and warm by itself. He would take it upstairs and wrap it around him and keep himself warm. Who, what, where, when, why? And you've answered it from just taking an object out. One at a time at first. One at a time, and model it. One at a time, get the children used to using their imagination, and then they give you the ideas as to what it is. And they can make up a story. Once you're starting to get into the middle regions of Key Stage 1, then you can take out 3 objects. One could be a what, one could be a who. The first thing I pulled out was this. So it's a gardener. It's a man who works in a garden, or it's somebody who lives in the middle of a forest. It's somebody who likes to eat beautiful green food. Who could it be? A man, a woman, a boy, a girl. Somebody who liked to play cricket. It was a girl, and she loved to play cricket on the fine, sweet green grass. You would take out another object, perhaps from a way, and you would take out, first thing here, and it's a little magnifying glass. Where could it be? Well, it could be by a telescope. It could be by somebody who likes to look out to sea. It could be by a tall tower that has a round window in the top. And you start to take these objects out. And again, I keep saying this, but it's all about control. I'm going to choose somebody to take something out of the bags, and you choose, and they open up a zip, and it's all about making sure that they all have a turn, and you can pop the things back and put them back in. Well, let's try it. This is for foundation stage and Key Stage 1. Let's see. I will choose something out of the bag, and what can I choose? I'll choose something out of this small one here. It says when. Now here we've got a little pearl. Use your imagination and inspire the children to use theirs. What could the pearl be? What colour is it? When could it be? It could be at the night time, when the moon's in the sky like a great pearl necklace. There it is, you can see it in the sky, and you can use, well, we've got a when. Let's choose a who. Who have we got? We've got, hand in, a woman. A woman who only liked to look at herself in a lake. And she would look by the light of that beautiful pearly moon. She would look at her reflection, and she loved to see what she could see. And let's choose one more. Let's see. I'll choose a what. And what happened to that woman? What happened to her? Well, there was a man in a boat, and he made the water ripple, and she couldn't see her reflection. And she said, "You're spoiling it. I really like to see myself in the reflection in the pool of water." And the man said, "You don't need to just look at yourself in a pool of water at night." And out of his pocket he pulled a mirror and showed the woman that she was beautiful, whether the moon was in the sky or not. There's a story that came from 3 objects. What we've done with the several bags that we've made is we've tried to set them so that they match the children's needs. Obviously, with the concrete experience of the younger children, they need to see objects, and a lot of the younger ones will take it as literal as if there's a hairbrush, then it's a hairbrush. What you need to do is you need to push them that little bit further and say that it could be a hedgehog, or it could be 1,000 men marching, or it could be somebody playing drums. But with the Key Stage 2 children, the bags are slightly different. There are physical objects inside, but for the Year 6s, the bags would have a lot more photographs in. So it would be secondary experience and not so much of a concrete object. And with the 5 questions, which by the time they've got to Year 6, hopefully they've been saturated with who, where, what, why, don't forget when, you can say, why don't we have 3 objects out of this bag? And we're going to choose 3, and we're going to start with either a who, a where, a what, or a when. You can use why, but why is a little bit more tricky. That can perhaps not be the first one that you take out. So let's have a little look. When. Okay, so choose a when it's going to be. Put my hand inside, and we've got a small bead. Well, it could be, when could be that there were some people playing football. So it was on a football Saturday. So when was it? It was on a football Saturday when there was a ball, round and brown, rolling on the hard, heavy ground. And everyone was cheering for their team. Go on, it's much better than once upon a time there was a small wooden bead. So we know that it's a football Saturday. So that was the when. Let's choose a who. And let's see, and we'll take a who out of here. We've got, it's a crowd of people. It's a crowd of people all standing beside a tent. So who were these people? Well, maybe it was people who lost their homes. And these people, although they're standing and smiling now, all they've got in all of this world are the tents that they live in. So they're playing a game of football on the hard, heavy ground by the side of the tents. The sun is shining. You can use this. It's all about observation. They were looking at the ground and hoping that they could have something other than one ball between so many of them. So we've got a when and a who. Let's choose, let's see, a when. First one out. And it's a photograph of some driftwood. And the driftwood looks quite dry. And these people who've lost their homes, who are playing football on the green fields, finally found a place where they could find a ball that had been washed up, soft and good to play with, and not just one, but 5 that they could play with on the soft green earth by the side of the sea. But it took them a long time to travel to that place. And there you've used 1 object and 2 photographs. And you pull them out of the bag, and again it's all about practice. Taking a photograph out, looking at it, talking about it, and using the 5 questions and giving the 5 answers. Now, the last thing we're going to look at is how we can record these stories. I've got to say that with the curriculum being driven in the way that it is with evidence, it tends to put the pressure on children that all they've got to do is make sure everything's written down. And it's hard on teachers as well, because they're looking for evidence to prove that the children can be creative, that they understand about the English language, that they know how to use description. It's not the be-all and end-all, and I know that's easy for me to say since I'm not actually teaching in the classroom, but I do a lot of work with a lot of children from all ages, and if you have the oral production of a story used as a game, used as an enjoyable activity, then you're more likely to get the children who have a hard and fast understanding of what constitutes a story, then they'll be able to write a story. If they can say it, then hopefully with time and practice they'll be able to actually complete a written story. Now, I know that I hear this a lot, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but a lot of people will say, oh yes, he or she can tell a fantastic story, but they can't write it down. And that's a bit like saying, your ideas are rubbish, because you can't write it. For some children, writing a sentence a day is a bit like climbing Everest. And if they've got ideas that are channeled through only being able to complete one sentence, then it's very difficult for them to feel good about their creative processes. If we act as scribes or part scribes for children of all ages, so that they've got a bit of the story down, their ideas are committed to paper, whether they've written them or not, then they start to understand what the process is all about. Okay? So, with the youngest children, if you've made up a story taking 3 objects, well, what you do is you split the children up into, let's say, 3 or 6 groups. And with the youngest, you draw a picture from the beginning. And then you draw a picture from the middle with another group. And you draw a picture from the end with the other group. And if you've got 6 groups, then you get them to have a turn at drawing pictures. And then you compile those pictures, all the pictures from the beginning, at the beginning, all the pictures from the middle, in the middle, all the pictures from the end, at the end. You ring bind them together and you've made a story. Now some of the children will do emergent writing that goes with that. That's all the better. You could put maybe some part scribed words underneath, but it's still a story structured in 3 parts, and the children will wait to see their part of the story that they've drawn with anticipation. Honestly, they do look forward to seeing their own picture, and it puts their ideas into context with all of the other children in the class. So that's one way of recording. Another way is to get the children to write maybe 1 word, or break the whole story up and they write 1 word that's relevant to the beginning, the middle and the end. And again, compile it. Because 1 sheet of paper from 1 child in their drawer doesn't make any sense to them. It's a bit of the story. But if they see their work as collaborative, where each of the pictures that have been done by all of the other children, and it's for all of the children to read and look at, then they've got a sense of purpose for writing. Okay, and from that you can take it to the stage where you have a sheet of A4 paper folded in portrait like this, and what you would get the children to do would be to draw a picture of the whole story on the front, and inside they could draw a picture from the beginning, and then from the middle, and then from the end. And with older children you would put the word beginning, middle and end, and they know that this is the title page with their name on, and this is something from the beginning of the story, from the middle of the story and the end of the story. Now these sheets are actually on disc in the school, but it's just a folded sheet of paper and it looks like a book. It goes left to right. It has a cover page, it has a spine, it has beginning, middle and end. And for the youngest children, a picture from the beginning. Slightly older, a word from the beginning. Slightly older still, a small sentence with perhaps the year 1s, year 2s, a few lines. I am not saying that there is any difference between the picture and the writing. They are both as equal for them to use. Another idea which I've used a lot is to take a sheet of paper, fold it in half, draw a tram line down the middle. I call this a tram line to stop them from writing across it. For the beginning, they can either write or draw. For the middle, they can write or draw. And for the end, they can write or draw. There's a big arrow at the top. You've got a copy of this in school to make sure they know which way is the right way up. You might as well teach them right from the very beginning. These lines are quite thin, these ones are thicker, and at the end these lines are quite heavy indeed. Okay, so you have a sheet, something about the beginning, something about the middle, something about the end, and it's easy and it's quick just to get the children to write a few words and to start thinking about how a story can be made up of 3 parts. Now this can be used throughout the whole school. It just becomes more complex. You can take exercise books and take out the staples and give the children in year 5 and 6 that to write. Now, I know that with very young ones, they're used to writing on a single sheet and they get to here and stop. You want to get the children to write a certain amount, and it's up to you to decide with the ability of your children. And you could have 3 different types of the same folded sheet for children of different abilities. Lots of lines, a few lines, no lines at all. The children all think that they're working from the same sheet of paper, and you are just differentiating between their capabilities. Okay? And for older children, again, to make notes, this could be what somebody said at the beginning, what people said in the middle, and what people said at the end, or the setting at the beginning, middle, and end, or how a character changed from the beginning and the middle and the end, or to put their notes. I know that children don't always see the point of notes, but if they are introduced to it from a very early age and they understand that there's a 3-part nature to a story, then they should be able to follow it. Now, these sheets are the ones that I've used for character. And with the character sheets, in the way that you have this, for Key Stage 1, you would get them to draw a picture of the person here and write the words on that side. You extend it for Key Stage 2 and above by having the drawing of the character here, the external characters here, and the internal characters on this piece, on this piece here. And in the same way as I've used for setting, you could have this again. This would be for the very young ones. They could draw a picture of what the setting was like at the beginning, draw a picture of what the setting was like in the middle, and draw a picture of what the setting was like at the end. And for Key Stage 2, it's written about the setting, it's written about the setting here, and there's a description of the story in the middle. I can only say that I've used all of these things since 1999. They've been developed in the best part of 900 schools that I've visited in those 7 years. It does work. It takes practice. I'm not expecting you to pick up a sheet of paper and suddenly start getting all of your children to write. They need encouragement. They need you to practice it as well. The stories that you get out will be equivalent to the amount of effort that you can put in. I know that your time is precious, but these are things that work. If a child has never seen a story being written, they don't know how to write a story. If they've never seen a character sheet being written, then they don't know how to write about characters. If you direct them, if you give them an easy formula, and all of these things that we've done have been a formula. You can't improvise on anything until you know what the structure is. And with these, it gives it a structure that goes right from nursery up to year 6. Thank you very much. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, your senses from the heart. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to start. There once was a girl with golden curly hair. She ate some porridge and she broke a little chair. She went to bed as quiet as a mouse, and when she woke up she was in the bear's house. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, your senses from the heart. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to start. With eyes the size of saucers, by a dirty great big hall, by a bridge, by a river, lived a hairy scary troll. Who's that trapping on my bridge? He wished he'd never said it when he met the goat that's big. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, your senses from the heart. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to start. wish that we could. He huffed and he puffed and he blew 2 homes away, but it was the little pigs who lived another day. A poor cinder-covered lass had a pumpkin coach and a slipper made of glass, and 2 ugly sisters couldn't fit inside the shoe, but she got Prince Charming, she deserved him too. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, your senses from the heart. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to start. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, your senses from the heart. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to. I'll tell you a story, I can't wait to. Tell you a story, I can't wait to start.
Now once there was a king, and he was a mean king. Now I don't mean that he was unpleasant or horrible, he was just mean. He didn't really like to spend money on anything. But this king was fussy as well. He would go, oh, my plate's on top of the table's dirty and I don't like it. So he went to all of the wise men in the country and said, I want you to make me something that keeps my plate off the table, and I want it to be covered with gold and jewels. But he was mean. And I don't mean he was nasty, and I don't mean he was horrible, but he wouldn't spend any money. And all of his men, well, they scratched their chins and they rubbed their heads, and they thought to themselves, well, what can we do? But there was a boy, and the boy was very clever. He walked straight up to the king and said, Your Majesty, I will be able to keep your plate from off the table, and it will only cost you 1 piece of paper. Now the king was very nosy, and he said, all right, then show me, because if you have a piece of paper, that's not going to keep my plate off the table, or not very high. The boy smiled, and he took the piece of paper and he folded it in half, and the king, who was very nosy, looked and watched him make a very hard fold inside of the paper, and the boy stood it up. The king said, that's not going to hold my piece. It's not going to hold my plate at all. But the boy said, just wait. And he folded it again. And again he made a hard fold, and he ran his fingers over the top of the fold, and he folded it in half. And the king looked and said, I don't think that will make my plate stay off the table. And the boy folded it round, and he put it like that, and he put the plate on top. And the king said, that's very good. But he was fussy. It's too high now. And the boy waited, and the boy looked, and the boy said, well, what I can do is I can fold it again. This time he folded it not from side to side, but along the full length of the piece of paper. And the king was intrigued, and he looked, and the boy cut from one side to the middle, and from another side to the middle, and from that side to the middle. And the king looked, and again he scratched his head and he rubbed his chin, and he thought to himself, what's the boy going to do? Well, he watched him and he cut, and he thought, what is this boy doing? He's cutting the paper. That's not going to make it very strong. But the boy took the paper and he cut, and he said, Your Majesty, watch. It will only cost you 1 piece of paper and 3 paper clips. The king liked the idea of this, because just like the local school, they had millions of paper clips in that kingdom. And he folded one piece on top of the other. The king said, well, that looks just like a dog. That doesn't look much. But the boy waited and said, look, Your Majesty, get a hold of it. And he pulled it up. And he pulled another piece up. And he put the pieces on top of each other. And he took the paper clip with the round piece down and put it and said, "Your Majesty, look, I have made a box for you." The king looked and said, "Well, that's a very good box, but it's not going to be very strong." The boy folded it together, put it down, put the plate on top, and the king was very pleased. He said, "Well, I think that you will be able to give me a bent yellow banana and put it on top, and that's all you'll be able to put." And the boy took a yellow bent banana and put it on top, and the king couldn't believe his eyes. Again, he scratched his chin and he rubbed his head. He said, "I don't think that you'll be able to put a green crunchy pear on top of there." And the boy had a green crunchy pear, which was hard as well. And he put it on top, and the king couldn't believe his eyes. Well, the king said, "I would like to have a very salty sausage roll, and I don't think there'll be enough space for that." And the boy watched, and he gave him a sausage roll, and he put it on top, and the king, he gasped. That's all he could. But the thing that he really liked better than anything else in all of this world was to have a huge, round, sticky orange. "I think I'll have 3 of them." The boy looked, because he knew that it was going to be strong. There was one round, sticky orange, and another round, sticky orange. And this time he went out, and he just couldn't believe it, because he got the biggest, roundest, sweetest Jaffa orange you ever did see in all of your life, and he put it on top, and still the box. The king said, "I want to have some chips." And he gave him some chips that were small and square. He put them on, and he had some more, 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 and then he had some licorice that was long and thin, and he put that on top. And the king watched, and all of the food that he wanted to eat, all of the grapes that he could eat, all went on top of there. And to finish it all off, the king said, "I would like to have a flat, round, cooked pancake." And there it was, a flat, round, cooked pancake on top of the plate. And the king thought that the boy was very clever, but I've told you already, he was very fussy. He said, "That's very good, but it's not very interesting." The boy sat down, and what did he do? Well, he made patterns of diamonds and jewels and all kinds of lovely gold and silver, and he made a box for the king with 1, 2, 3 paper clips and a beautiful pattern on it. And the king was very pleased indeed, because now he could see that he had a fine box to put all of his food on and keep it away from the plate, keep it away from the table. And the box that was made was covered in diamonds and jewels and was patterned. And the king looked and smiled. There was an old man and there was an old woman, and they lived in a house. Now the man and the woman and all of this world, all they had was 1 cow. And all they had in all of this world was 1 sheep. And they lived in that place, and one day when the sun was shining, the old man woke up and he stretched, and he looked at the old woman and said, "It's your turn to go and look after the cow." And the woman said, "No." The man said, "Yes." And she said, "No, no, and yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes." And the two of them got so angry that they raised their hands and they shouted at each other, and no one looked after the cow that day. But the next day, when the sun came up, the old woman looked at the man and said, "It's your turn to go and look after the sheep." And the man said, "No." And she said, "Yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes." And they sat there in that place, and they raised their hands, and they screamed, and they yelled, and nobody looked after the sheep or the cow that day. Now on the 3rd day, the old woman woke up and she stretched. She looked at the old man and said, "I want you to go and get me some food to eat." And the old man said, "Yes." Well, he got himself dressed. He said, "I'm very silly. I always shout and scream and yell." And down the stairs he went, and he went out through the door, and they were like squeaky doors. He went out through the door, and as he went out of the door, he picked up potatoes from out of the ground. And he listened, and he heard a voice, and the voice shouted out, "Help! and he looked this way, and he looked that, and he looked up, he looked down, and he looked all around, and there he saw a pool of green, sticky mud. And in the mud there was a woman. The woman was no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, and she was shouting, "Help me, help me, help me!" And the old man knew exactly who she was. She was the queen of the fairies, and if he helped her, then she would give him 1, 2, 3 magic wishes. He stepped into the mud. And he got hold of the little woman by her shoulders, and he pulled her out of the mud, but he fell in the mud with a great big splash. And he had mud on his nose. He had mud in his hair. He had mud in his pockets. He had mud inside of his shoes. But the little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, she said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You've helped me. I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you not 1, not 2, but 3 magic wishes." The old man was very pleased. She said, "Have you got lots of cows?" And the old man said, "Ha! Do I look like I've got lots of cows? I've only got 1 cow." Well, the little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, she said, "You could use 1 wish for a cow." "Have you got lots of sheep?" said the little woman. He said, "Ha! Do I look like I've got lots of sheep? I've only got 1 sheep." "Well, you could use a second wish to wish for a sheep." "Have you got a wife?" And the old man said, "Yes, I've got a wife. But I always argue with her, and I'm always cross." And she said, "I'm not going to give the wish to you. I'm going to give them to your wife. You'd better go home as quick as you like and see what she has wished for." The old man ran back home, and he opened up the door. And his wife said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I met a little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and do you know? And she gave you 3 magic wishes." "I don't believe you." "It's true, it's true. It's true as can be. True for you and true for me. Wish for something, see what you can see." "All right then," said the old woman. She said, I wish that there was a sausage on top of a fire and in a pan." And there was a rushing sound, and there was a rattling sound, and there was a great big crash, and down the chimney came a fire, and on top of the fire there was a pan, and in the pan there was a sausage, the biggest sausage in all of this world. And the old man started to dance. You see, it's true as can be. True for you and true for me. You wished for a sausage, and a sausage you can see." But when he danced, he knocked the pan over, and the sausage fell down on the ground and into the fire, and the old woman was angry. "You silly man, you're always dancing around. I wish that the sausage was on the end of your nose." And quicker than a wink or a blink of an eye, there was a rushing sound, and there was a rattling sound, and there was a great big crash, and the sausage slipped and slithered, crept and crawled, and it stuck itself right on the end of the old man's nose. The old man was still dancing, and he stamped on the sausage and he yelled, "Ow! Look what you've done! You've gone and turned my nose into a sausage!" The old woman ran over. She grabbed hold of his nose that was now a sausage, and she pulled. And the old man yelled, "Ow! You can't pull my nose off!" He sat down. He was very sad. And when he sat there, a tear rolled down his eyes, and he spoke. "You had 3 wishes. You wished for a sausage, and you wished for the sausage on the end of my nose. You've only got 1 wish left. You'll have to wish for the sausage to come off my nose." And the old woman said, "No, you could stay inside of the house and wish for cows and wish for sheep and gold and silver and diamonds and a new house." And the old man cried, "You can't leave me with a sausage for my nose." The old woman looked at him. She couldn't stop herself. He did look funny with a sausage on the end of his nose. She went, Look at you with the sausage. Don't laugh at me. Oh, it's all right, said the old woman. And she said, I wish that the sausage would come off the end of the old man's nose. And there was a rushing sound and a rattling sound. And there was a great big crash. And the sausage came from the end of the old man's nose and rolled itself around in a circle on a plate. And the old man sat down. And the old woman sat down. She took a knife and a fork, cut some sausage and put it on his plate. She cut some more and put it on her own plate. And just as she was about to eat some of the sausage, she couldn't stop herself. She went, yeah. You did look funny with the sausage. The old man couldn't stop. Two of them laughed and laughed. To think that in all of this world, all they got for 3 magic wishes was sausage for the supper. But the next day, the old woman, when she woke up and the sun was shining, she said, would you come and help me to look after the cow and the sheep? And the old man said, yes. And the two of them, they went hand in hand down the stairs and out through the old squeaky door. Looked after the cow, looked after the sheep, and the two of them lived happily ever